All right, recording has started. Hello, everyone, and welcome, if I've not said it already. I think we have a new member, unless you've been here before, Session. I'm afraid if you have, I don't remember. Would you like to say hello? Okay, Session is listening in, hopefully. So let's go on to today's meeting. So today's meeting is about generating ideas for guides that the Cloud Robotics Working Group can make. So I'll present a window. Here we go. Thanks, Session. Session's in the library, no problem. Okay, this should be fine. So this is what I've currently built, which is not a lot, but it seems to me that a new guides tab on the Cloud Robotics Hub would be good, which can have multiple different guides, starting with uploading robot data to the cloud. So that's what we've been discussing for the past two meetings. We've talked about the kinds of data to upload, kinds of application that we would use, and some other considerations like whether it's captured in the moment or after the fact. So, it's related to the incident that it is useful for. These are all things that I think we have enough information for me to write more of a guide. But I think also we can think of other guides. So from our State of Cloud Robotics server, which was a while ago, we did see that people want more recommendations for best practices. I think we are a good group to make those recommendations, not just collect those together. So that's what today's meeting is about. With that introduction, I'll stop sharing. And yeah, if anyone's got any comments they want to make, let's start chatting.
So it really comes down to what kind of topics are both interesting to the community and we can sort of bring together enough knowledge to write a guide. Is that roughly right?
I think that's a good point. Yeah. What we have knowledge to do is something I hadn't really considered yet.
Well, we can start more on the front side of it, right? Like, I mean, we are a community, so we can always invite people. And the data upload also, we had to start somewhere, right? And then you read and you almost, do the research in the sort of original sense of research, like searching the literature, right? Yeah, it's a good question. What are some other issues that people struggle with? Related to data upload, I guess logging comes to mind. It's a sort of a specific thing. It's a specific aspect of data upload. And what's interesting about logging, or I guess in general observability, is it's sort of a never-ending story, and it's also super custom to what you need. And it involves, unlike data upload, it also involves this notion of alerting, right? Because you don't just want to upload your logs and then have if there is errors in there, for instance, right? You would want to know, and then how do you how do you get notified? How do you determine who gets notified? So I think this whole notion of observability and logging is a good one.
To add on to that, I think some robotics would need traceability, so that would also tie into that. I don't think it's much harder to prove that you've got traceability from your own custom logging solution, but if you use a cloud built one, you can get that.
That's a good one. We could invite Kyle. I forget his last name. He worked on Basis Robotics for about half a year or to a year, which was an alternative to ROS, which was very much focused on deterministic replay and traceability, like being able to. And this is something that I've heard also from Carsten. I forget his last name. P from NVIDIA. He gave a talk at a ROS meetup here in the Bay Area, where he was talking about the need for deterministic replay and determinism in general. It goes a little bit beyond what you mean there by traceability, but I think it's all very related. Unfortunately, that also then very quickly gets into criticism of ROS, which is not necessarily what we are after here. We are more trying to guide people in what they can do, as opposed to pointing out what may be missing from current tools. but it's definitely a good topic.
Well,
I guess the other. Yeah, go on.
saying that ROS doesn't have it, I think I agree that we don't want to be like, oh, ROS is bad for these reasons, but we do want to say if your goal is to achieve traceability, do keep this in mind. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. I think then it's actionable, right? Then at least people know, that this is something that they need to stay aware of. I mean, one thing that I think everybody is thinking of outside of robotics is that of robotics we should all be talking about AI and how to train your models, how to collect the data. Um, I personally feel very much not equipped to give a good overview of that because there's just so much and a lot of it is still research. But sort of a how to get started with deep RL or something like that, deep reinforcement learning, would probably be something that some people would like. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I was just writing that down. I think that is a good idea, but I would also say I'm not equipped to write it. Which brings up that we can ask for help with these as well. We can say, we're the Cloud Robotics Working Group, we've written these guides, we want to write these guides. Does anyone with the knowledge, would they be able to review and provide tips and so forth? So, and then on a similar note is the site source code is open source. We can ask people to contribute fixes, issues, and so on. So one thing that I want to have is on the page edit on GitHub. That's a normal link for Docusaurus sites. Hopefully people will follow through with that. But it doesn't affect this discussion too much. It's just, yes, we should probably think this is a good topic, but we don't know. This is a good topic, but we do know. And then, we can focus on the ones we do know first. So deep RL, outside help needed. And then logging / observability. I'd say we could get a good amount of that done. I think I know some, Christian. I think you know a lot more.
Sorry, I was blanking out. What do we know about
Logging and/or
logging? Yeah.
observability.
I also just realized I made that DeepRL suggestion, and now I realize that's actually not very specific to cloud robotics at all. I mean, that's more of a general robotics thing. So people may not necessarily expect that on our to see that on our page. Logging, on the other hand, is of course right, because logging you clearly have to upload to the cloud, otherwise it's pretty pointless.
That's true. I guess the only reason you'd involve machine learning on this is you can run simulations and reinforcement learning in the cloud. So yeah. I guess the guide at that point wouldn't be how to do deep RL. It would be how to set up machine learning jobs in the cloud and then do your own RL.
Yep.
So maybe I'll write that as a topic instead, setting up machine learning in the cloud. That reminds me, deployment, pipelines, that kind of a thing. So CI/CD in the cloud, based on the cloud. And then we discussed deployment before. So I know deployment's in continuous deployment, but we had a whole conversation about deployment, which seemed like possibly its own guide.
I think that's a good one. Yeah, definitely. And there we could invite probably Vedant from Miro ML would be willing to come talk to us about it, how they approach it. Maybe we could get one of the Airbotics folks to give us the lowdown of what they learned through their journey. We already linked to Andrew's awesome Cloud Robotics collection in our resources page. Something like that would be great, and that might be an interesting way for us to collect that data too, right? That we basically invite an expert, so to say, somebody at least who spent a good amount of time thinking about this, interview them as a means of us collecting the data, but then that's also a good video for the community to to find on our webpage on the YouTube channel that you're maintaining. And then we can write it up as a guide. That might be a good approach. I would personally really like that.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's much easier to ask someone to come and answer questions instead of prepare a talk.
Yeah, that or ask somebody, hey, can you help us write a guide? Because it's easier to just sort of show up unprepared and answer some questions, and then the duty is not to come up with good questions, of course. But I think we are pretty good as a team there, especially if we do a little bit of prep work, and then while we are talking, while one of us is interviewing the person, the others can think along, and usually we come up with good new questions too.
So ask the prepared questions, and then other people can ask other questions from that.
Yeah, I don't know. Have we done this before? I want to say that we have interviewed people, but I don't quite remember. I guess we had folks from Cloud Robotics. Is that the only interview that we've done?
I don't think we've had an interview. What we've had is a few guest talks with Q&A sections, and then in those Q&A sections we've done more questioning, which has been good. But I think if someone doesn't have a talk ready and they're asked, hey, do you want to give a talk? That's much harder to do than just come and answer questions. So yeah, I like that. That's a really good idea for a session format.
We do have just a logistical question. We already have resources and with categories on the page, and there's also deployment. But for you, that's slightly different from the guide, right? For you, the guide is much more of a how to and what to think about, and the resources are really like external resources, like links and tools and frameworks and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think that could probably be more separated. Maybe I'll think of different words for that. Resources versus guides, not clear.
Mm-hmm. Well, or we may just need to bring them closer together so that we don't have two places where deployment shows up, but have it more like, okay, deployment, and then we have resources and guides, kind of flip the tree on its head or something like that. That might be a little bit easier to understand for people.
Yeah.
But we can sort that out once we have the content. This is not urgent.
It's a good point. Each of our sections that we're looking into can have, this is what we think and this is what external resources you can use. But yeah, you're right. Look, we can think about that later. I think there's pros and cons to each approach. So we've got so far we've got get started with DeepRL that I think we've agreed is not strictly cloud robotics. Logging observability, setting up machine learning in the cloud, deployment from the cloud to robots, and CI/CD, which can include, which is another topic, simulation in the cloud, where CI/CD, you can run some automated tests like publish a topic, does the topic get published, and some tests like tell the robot to go here, does the simulated robot move there. So sometimes you do want simulation in the loop too.
Yeah, this is something that you've been touching on in your previous role at AWS, right? Wasn't there weren't you involved a little bit in that effort, RoboMaker and so forth?
Briefly, I knew about it more than I was involved in it, but that was the idea, and unfortunately, RoboMaker has been deprecated. I don't think people are using it for that anymore, which is a shame because I think people agreed that it was a good idea. So now they're looking for a way to do it themselves, I imagine. Roll your own RoboMaker.
The issue with simulation in the cloud is that you need GPU instances pretty much, because otherwise it's not. A lot of like Gazebo at least uses hardware accelerated physics simulation, and that's a good idea, but GPU instances in the cloud are pretty expensive. So for at least for us, it didn't make sense. We did the math, and it was just, I think I forget what it was, but after a few months, we could have paid for our own GPU server on-prem, and then we just used an on-prem server. But things have changed, and obviously NVIDIA keeps pushing on this as well. So it might be a worthwhile revisiting that, and that's something that we could sort of do as a service to the community, doing a little bit of research, doing the math, and seeing what makes sense there. Unfortunately, I don't have too much practical experience with this, at least not from the last few years. But maybe this is something where we could, again, ask somebody to visit.
Yeah, that's it's a bit of a shame that they are so expensive compared to other instances. And I don't know what effect the NVIDIA stuff would have, because it could have made it more expensive because everyone wants to use it for LLMs.
Yeah, for sure. And then before that, it was Bitcoin, right? But yeah, I don't know. It may also be a matter of going through the trouble of setting it up in a way where you can really, spin it up and down just for that simulation very efficiently. I don't know that we got to that when we were looking into that, but it was definitely not worthwhile keeping an instance running the whole time. And that's, I don't know. I feel so naive to even say that, because people who have been working with GPU instances in the cloud probably laugh at that and go like, yeah, obviously. But yeah, so really just saying, I don't know.
Yeah, you would try to do that. Another idea is that you said about running it on-prem. So another idea might be, here's how you can use your own instance hooked up to your pipeline running in your self-hosted GitLab or whatever to do this stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't know how that works with on-prem, but definitely, self-runners are a thing in GitHub Actions. And in fact, personally, I'm a big fan of them because you have good control over them, and you have persistence of data and caching and all of that. And so it would seem it should be fairly straightforward to add a self-hosted and on-prem GPU server as a self-runner in GitHub Actions, and then use that for CI/CD, including simulation. That's actually that's an interesting one to explore.
Yeah, that might be a blog post, or it might be a guide, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times these guides can be, when we first announce the guide, it can be a blog post, right? Where we don't necessarily repeat the content, but perhaps a little bit of the motivation. And it can be one of these really short blog posts, like or maybe it's not even a blog post, but a post, you know what I mean? Like a post that we distribute on whatever, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we will still have an entry on our page to announce it. But it doesn't have to be long.
Yeah, that is making good sense to me. Okay, so
The one thing that I'm still thinking about is the whole cloud, web dashboards and so forth. The problem there is I'm so close to it that I can't write a guide, because I would never shut up. It would go on and on and on and on and on and on, because that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years. But somehow I don't know. Maybe you can tell me, because you're a little more removed from that. But what would people be interested in that, or is that too is that too obvious at this point? How do you set up cloud dashboards for your robots?
I don't think it's too obvious. No, I mean, isn't that what Foxglove is all about?
Foxglove is is actually not for monitoring. It's mostly for post hoc debugging. It's really a developer tool. It falls into that category, but it's not really a web tool. It is built on web technology, but you cannot embed it in your own web page or anything like that. And it's not meant as a fleet. I've talked to them about it. I mean, at least a few years ago, they were not thinking of going into the fleet monitoring space in the sense of watching live. Like, yes, you can create a live connection to your robot, but it's still a one-to-one connection with one robot, and then you do that to sort of see what's going on with this robot right now. And then, yes, they do have the past recordings, but it's not so much a tool for operating your fleet. Like, you don't first of all, you don't expose that to your customers. If you're a robotics company and you're providing a robotics as a service offering, you don't enable your customers to see Foxglove. Nor does necessarily your field ops team monitor this the whole time and use it to, I don't know, relocalize the robot or control it. Some people use it for that purpose, but it's not necessarily the intended design.
Right. So Foxglove doesn't do it. I think I haven't had a lot of people saying they want a robot dashboard or a dashboard for robots. I think that's sort of basically it comes down to, if people aren't using the cloud for their robots, then the reason to start doing it wouldn't necessarily be the dashboard. It would be logging or something.
Oh, interesting.
Or deployment. And then after the fact, once you've got the connection, then you can start to do cool things like robot dashboards. I don't know if that's true. You might have had a different experience, but
I mean, as far as I can see, once you have 5 robots, you know that you need a sort of a centralized dashboard, because it doesn't scale it. Like, again, and this is perhaps a little too close, so I don't know to what extent I'm biased, but everything that I've seen and when I talk to people, I hear that, well, they start out with SSH and VPN, right, and ROS, and that works. But then after a while, and once they have 5 to 10 robots, they realize manually deploying to the field and monitoring doesn't make any sense. And then robots start being offline, and then they realize they do need to have a centralized cloud dashboard, and that is both the data and the dashboard, right? The ability to see, how's my fleet doing, where are my robots, right? Like, you have a warehouse, there's 5 robots deployed. You want to know where all of them are at the same time. You don't want to log into each one, do a ROS topic echo to get the XY, get out a paper map and see where that robot is, right? So yeah, seeing robots on a map is a big one. Then when robots are mislocalized, you typically, that, which still happens, unfortunately, fairly, like more often than we would all like to believe, you need to be able to relocalize that robot. For that, you kind of want a visual thing where you can drag the robot around, see the laser scan, match it to the walls. And then map management in and by itself, like you need to keep track of, especially in warehouses, maps change, unfortunately, sometimes, because things move around. Or same in indoor spaces, furniture moves around, so you need to keep an eye on that. And then you need to manage these maps, see which map does the robot have loaded, do they get localized. And then this whole issue of health monitoring. Like, these robots are so complicated, right? Because a lot of it is self-made, hardware, firmware, sensor positioning, transforms, and all of that stuff, that there's a lot to monitor, and a lot of things that can go wrong. So yeah, some sort of health monitoring is something people typically have on their dashboards, just because it's more efficient than, because they will get notified, oh, well, your robot doesn't move. That's all the customer will say, right? And then you need to fairly quickly figure out what's going on. And you don't always want to, as your fleet grows, you don't always want to have engineers do that. And so web tools are sort of the way to go to enable your field ops team to do more and more of the triaging. And this is where you see that once I start, I don't stop. So I'll stop here.
no, it's good. I think if you're trying to persuade someone that they should connect their robots to the cloud, it's the kind of thing you would talk about, being able to see the fleet as a whole. The steps of hooking up the robot, I think step 1 is you need the connection to begin with, so that you can upload the data, which is kind of what we've started talking about, our first guide. I think the next guide after that is probably how you can use the data, which might be fleet dashboard, it might be debugging tools. And I assumed that deployment would be higher on the list than visualization, but now I'm not sure. I think based on what you said, I could be persuaded otherwise.
Well, so the truth is that Foxglove is sort of a better Arvis, right? I mean, it scratches the same itch. It helps you debug really the robotics layer, like the navigation localization layer of your robot. And just in the development life cycle, that comes earlier, right? Like you need to have a robot that moves around the facility wherever it operates and not bump into things, not have false positives either in terms of stopping when there's just ghosts or whatever. And during that time, you need things like Foxglove. It doesn't have to be Foxglove at that point. Often, people still work on the robot itself. A lot of times they're still with the robot itself, and so then Arvis just works just fine. But then at the sort of 5 to 10, 20, 10 robot level, probably it's more convenient to do Arvis, Foxglove, because you can be remote and so forth. It's also around the same time when you start realizing you need to at least have names on your versions that you're running, and not just have developers push code to robots and execute it, right? That's sort of the first thing that you need to kind of graduate from. And then usually people realize, okay, at least we need to tag basically our Git commit, so we have a name on it, and then we need to build these things in whatever shape or form. An apt package, Docker container, whatever. And then that's honestly half the battle. Like getting a name on it and then knowing which robot runs what, that's half the battle. And then making it convenient to push it out, that's in some sense icing on the cake, but it becomes obviously more important over time. So that's where the deployment management really comes in. But to me, deployment management includes the former, right? Like where you design your bundling your packages and you give it names and you automatically build them and you decide how they get rolled out.
So yeah, I think I've listed CI/CD as separate from deployment, but at that point it is the same, and you wouldn't do CI/CD first. You would do
yeah. They're very coupled. I guess CI/CD also implies some sort of testing, which is separate from deployment. It's kind of obviously comes hopefully before deployment. But I guess the D part is the deployment. The I part is where you typically think about testing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that does make sense. So maybe this sort of story should be in the introduction to the guides. The introduction basically just says we have these guides available, but if we said this is why you might want to do some cloud robotics, this is how it can help you, that seems like a good thing to put on the introduction page.
Mm-hmm. For log ingest or logging, we could see whether we can get somebody from Model Prime to come talk to us. They are, from what I remember, I'm pulling up their website now again. I think logging is a big part of what they're thinking about. Just popped into my mind. Yeah, other than that, I think actually what we have so far, or what you have on your list, is probably plenty of homework for us for the next many months.
Definitely. So we've kind of been having the next part of the conversation already. Once we had some topics, it was what are the most important things to tackle first. And I think the story you just outlined of once you get 5 to 10 robots, you realize you need a central dashboard and so on. I think that's pretty key for it. So
well, one thing we could do is we could, we like to be very much a community and open, so open to all sides. One thing that we could do is do a very quick post on Rust Discourse or maybe some other forums as well, where we say, look, we've done this state of Cloud Robotics survey. We heard loud and clear people want more guides. So now we're pondering which guides to work on. Help us prioritize. Which of these, help us rank them. I think it would be great to see, like, which of these guides would people like to see first? And the nice thing about doing it up front is also then, it's clear that we're not just, advertising our own output here. We are really, we don't have much to show yet, only a list of things that we think about working on. And it's almost like an invitation for others to give us homework, right? And tell us, please research and find out what's the best way to do XYZ.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then in doing so, some people may even raise their hands and say like, hey, I know a thing or two about this. So maybe it's wishful thinking, but we will get some responses, and I think that's better than nothing.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think as long as we attribute people's work, people wouldn't mind contributing some time writing guides, especially if something exists already that they can hone.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, great.
Yeah, and I mean these guides but my overarching philosophy with robotics is that if you build a robotics company, you should outsource as much as you can, because you really don't need to reinvent the wheel, and it is hard enough even if you focus. So in a lot of places, the guide should be also that maybe that's why also the merging it or somehow combining it with the resources makes sense, is that you should use tools as much as possible, right? So for logging, for instance, Tomoya, who's been here as well, he gave a talk at Rust by the Bay, and he was talking about using FluentBit for log ingest. And I think that I looked it up, and I think it's a great tool, right? And of course, there's a lot of other tools around observability as well. So I think, and that's where third-party contributors here could plug in their own tool, give a plug for their own tools, and kind of have a chance to articulate why they are building it and why people shouldn't build it themselves. And I think to help the community, that is a message that people should be open to. I know some people sort of they want everything open source all the time, but there's downsides to that, and a lot of these tools are open source as well, right? Like some people's business models are open source. Foxglove, unfortunately, is no longer open source, but even them, they had their roots in open source. So these are probably related.
Yeah. So if we started to combine them, it would be use a pre-built tool. Here are the ones. Try this one out. One thing that springs to mind is, should we be building some kind of a reference architecture?
It's a lot of work. I mean, we did that for the web tools, and at Transitive we built that open source Transact dashboard. It's real work, right? I mean, even if you just do it as a reference, and so we are not, robotics companies struggle because they have to build all of these things while also running the company and having their robots out there. But they also get paid for that, right? We as a community building everything that's required to run a robotics company, but then not operating such a company and getting paid for it, right? I don't know that we can come up with the resources to do all of that. In some cases, if it's really mostly about plugging things together of existing tools, and in the observability space, there might be something like that, but the devil is in the detail. Like once you start using it, you realize that you're not done yet, right? And that's the other thing that we're missing, right? When we don't have a deployed fleet, like we as a team here, and so we can't really dog food our own tools very well and say whether or not this is now a good reference architecture or not. So I'd be hesitant to put out a proposal for something that I don't know extremely well, and I don't really have the means to grease the wheels, right, and try it out.
Yeah, I think a reference architecture could even just be a block diagram. However, I do think you're right that if we don't have a fleet to roll it out to, then how are we sure it's a good architecture? Might be advising a bunch of people to use something that doesn't scale past 15 robots, and that would be a real shame.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe put a pin in that. Maybe that's something someone from the community can contribute. I feel like it would be helpful, but like you say, a lot of work. Okay, so I think we've got we've got a set of potential guides. We've got a plan to put out a poll to see what people think are most important. We've also got a couple of names of people that could come and talk to us about them. So after the poll, if there's a good winner, we can reach out to people and try and get them in to talk to us about the guides. That'd be great. And in the meantime, still got the cloud data upload. So my plan with that is to continue working on it when I have a spare chance. And then if I get to a point where I think, oh, I'm just making the stuff up now, I'm not really talking for the group anymore, that's when I think I'd bring it back to another meeting and say, right, this is where we got to. Let's work together from here.
Sounds good. Yeah, and thanks for leading this and writing all of that.
Happy to do it, and glad I've got the group to help. With that, I think that's today's meeting kind of done. So
I think that's a good result. Yeah. And then, so I guess next step is we're going to poll the community, ask about. Cool. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I'll try and get that done tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get some results and then I can announce it for next meeting and we'll see if we can get someone in. So I think with that, unless anyone has anything they want to talk about, we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thanks for coming along. See you next meeting, hopefully.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.